Right, so let me set out what we're doing tonight, because it's not the usual thing. We're not going to run through the plot of One Piece. No arc by arc, no fight by fight, none of that. What I want to do instead is just wander through the world, sitting underneath the story, the lore, all the stuff that's been quietly stacking up in the background for more than 25 years, while everyone was busy watching a lad in a straw hat punch his way across the ocean. And there is a lot of it. One person has been telling this single story since the late 90s, and the world he built to hold it is one of the densest, strangest, most carefully layered places in any bit of fiction I can think of. Erased history, weapons named after gods, a whole century somebody deleted on purpose. So we'll take it slow. The shape of the world first, then the odd powers, then the mysteries, then the people who live in it. No rush. If you drift off somewhere in the middle, that's rather the point. Get comfortable and let's have a look. Here's the thing that always gets me about the world of One Piece. It's not the giant sea monsters, and it's not the pirates, though we'll get to all of that. It's that a compass doesn't work. You'd think the very first thing you'd pack for a life at sea would be a compass, and in most of this world, it's fine, it does the job. But the moment you sail into the one stretch of ocean, where all the treasure and all the adventure really is, your compass just spins uselessly, and if you trust it, you die. I love that as a starting point. The world is basically designed to eat anyone who assumes it works the normal way. So let me lay out the map, because once it clicks, it's rather elegant. The planet is nearly all ocean. There's one continent, and one only, a huge ring of red rock called the Red Line that wraps all the way around the world like a belt. Crossing it at right angles is a narrow strip of sea called the Grand Line, running the other way round the globe like a second belt. And where those two belts cross, they carve the ocean up into four big quarters. The North Blue, the South Blue, the East Blue, and the West Blue. 4 seas, each with its own weather and its own culture. And if you ask the people who live there, its own personality. The East Blue in particular has a reputation for being the weakest and gentlest of the 4, which is a lovely little joke, because that's exactly where our main character and several of his crew are from. The most dangerous man in the world came out of the most peaceful pond, sort of like how the quiet kid in class turns out to be the one you should have watched. Now the Grand Line. This is the interesting one. It's the sea route that every pirate worth anything is trying to sail, and it's split into 2 halves by that Red Line continent. The first half has a rather grim nickname, though people also call it Paradise, which tells you something about the sense of humour of everyone involved, since the entire Grand Line is known as the Pirates' Graveyard. And the second half, past the halfway point, is the New World, which is where the really terrifying people live. If you make it through Paradise, congratulations, you've reached the part where things get properly hard. But you can't just steer into the Grand Line from your local sea. And this is my favourite bit of the geography, because it's so unnecessarily cruel. Running along both sides of the Grand Line are 2 dead zones called the Calm Belts, and they are exactly what they sound like. No wind, no current, nothing. The water sits there flat as a mirror, which sounds peaceful until you remember a sailing ship needs wind to move. So you drift there, going nowhere. And while you're sitting there going nowhere, you find out the other detail about the Calm Belts, which is that they're the breeding grounds for the largest sea monsters on the planet. Enormous things. The Sea Kings. So the belt doesn't just trap you, it serves you up. Nightmare fuel, that. Which means there's really only one sensible way in. There's a mountain on the Red Line called Reverse Mountain, and it does something that shouldn't be physically possible. The sea currents from all 4 blues climb up the mountain all the way to the peak, and then pour down the other side into the Grand Line. So you point your ship at a mountain, you ride the water up and over, and you're in. Get the timing even slightly wrong, and you smash to pieces on the rock. There's a whale involved at the entrance too, but that's a story for another night. Once you're on the Grand Line, that's when the compass problem shows up. the islands out there, each generate their own magnetic field, so a normal compass has no idea which way to point. What you use instead is a special device called a log pose, which locks onto the magnetic pull of one island. And then when you arrive, it slowly resets and points you to the next one. So you don't navigate the Grand Line by choosing a direction. You navigate it by letting each island hand you off to the following island, like stepping stones. I find that truly charming as a bit of world design. You give up the illusion of control the second you enter, and you just follow the chain. And the weather out there deserves a mention of its own, because it's completely unhinged. The Grand Line doesn't do seasons or forecasts like a sensible ocean. The climate can flip from blazing summer to a blizzard in the space of a few minutes, then throw a water spout at you, then go dead calm, then hit you with a cyclone that came out of a clear sky. A stretch of sea can be sunny on the left side of your ship and snowing on the right. Navigators out there aren't really predicting the weather so much as bracing for it and hoping. There's a reason the good ones are treated as some of the most valuable people on any crew, worth more than the muscle in a lot of ways, because a fighter can win you a battle, but a navigator is the only thing standing between you and being swallowed by a sea that changes its mind every 10 minutes. Each island has its own settled climate too, so you get summer islands and winter islands, and spring and autumn ones, and some of them combine the lot into 4 separate seasonal zones on a single island, which is a lovely bit of nonsense. You can walk from a beach into a snowfield on the same afternoon. I do think it's telling that in a world this obsessed with strength and power, the person who quietly keeps everyone alive is the one reading the clouds and the pressure and the little shifts in the wind. Muscle gets the glory. The navigator gets you home. And here's a fun detail to sit with. To get from the first half of the Grand Line to the second half, you don't go over the red line. You go under it. There's an island sitting about 10,000 meters down at the bottom of the sea, right beneath the continent, and you have to sail down through the water in a coated ship to reach it and pass through. It's called Fishman Island, and it's home to the fish people and the mermaids, and it sits there, glowing in the dark of the deep ocean, with sunlight piped down to it from the surface. We'll come back to the people who live there. For now, I just think it's a beautiful idea. A whole kingdom at the bottom of the world that you can only reach by sinking on purpose. So that's the board we're playing on. 1 ring of land, 1 ring of sea crossing it, 4 quarters of ocean, 2 dead calm belts full of monsters, 1 mountain you ride like a slide, and a chain of magnetic islands. You follow one after another toward the far end. At the very end of that chain sits the final island, the one everyone's chasing, but we'll save that for much later because it deserves its own quiet moment. But the geography is only half of what makes this world tick. The other half is the powers, and in particular, these strange cursed little pieces of fruit that turn ordinary people into something else. Let's have a chat about those. So the way superpowers work in this world is that you eat a piece of fruit. That's it. That's the mechanism. And I do love how offhand it is. There's no chosen one, no radioactive spider, no lightning bolt. You bite into a funny-looking bit of fruit that tastes, by all accounts, absolutely disgusting. And from that moment on, you have a power for the rest of your life. But before we talk about the gift, we have to talk about the price, because there's always a price. The moment you eat one of these things, the sea rejects you. You lose the ability to swim permanently. Not, you get a bit weaker in water. You sink like a stone, and the ocean pulls the strength out of you completely. For a world that is almost entirely made of sea, where everyone lives on ships and islands, this is a spectacular thing to give up. You've got these people with the power to turn into fire or control gravity or become intangible, and every single one of them is terrified of falling off the boat. There's something wonderfully human about that. The stronger the power, the sillier the weakness. And it's not just seawater. There's a special mineral in this world, a sort of stone that gives off the same energy as the sea itself. They call it sea prism stone. touch it, or get cuffs of it slapped on your wrists, and it's like being thrown in the ocean. All your strength gone. This is how the world's prisons hold people who could otherwise level a building. This is what the handcuffs are made of. So the whole balance of power quietly rests on this one rock that cancels out the fruit. I think that's clever. Give everyone God's powers, then keep a leash in the drawer. Right, the powers themselves, they sort into 3 families, and once you know the 3, you can place almost any character you meet. The first and most common family is called paramecia. This is the everything else drawer. If your power isn't turning into an animal, and it isn't turning into an element, it's a paramecia. And because it's the catch-all, it's where all the weird ones live. Our main character's a mythical Zoan. His whole body turned to rubber, so he stretches and bounces and shrugs off blunt hits, and, rather usefully, lightning goes straight through him. But the drawer also holds people who can slice space itself, people who can turn anything they touch to string, people who can make bits of the world explode. And then, because the world has a sense of humour, the same drawer holds a bloke whose power is that he can chop his own body into floating pieces. That's it. That's the whole gift. He's since become one of the most feared men on the seas, mostly by accident, and I find that endlessly funny. The paramecia drawer is where the genius and the nonsense sit side by side. The second family is Zoan. These let you turn into an animal, and also into a sort of half and half hybrid of you and the animal, which tends to be the version people really fight in. A leopard man, a mammoth man, that kind of thing. On paper, the Zoan is the least flashy of the 3, and for a long time the fandom treated it as the boring option. That has aged very badly, for reasons we'll get to, because it turns out the most powerful people in the entire world are quietly sitting in this drawer. But we'll save that. And the third family is Logia, which is the rare and glamorous one. A Logia lets you become an element. Not control it from outside, become it. Turn your entire body into fire, or ice, or sand, or smoke, or light. And here's what makes them so frightening. If your body is made of smoke, how do you punch smoke? Your fist goes straight through. For a long stretch of the story, the Logia users seemed borderline unbeatable, for exactly this reason. You'd watch someone throw everything they had at a man made of flame and just pass through him like he wasn't there. The fire ones, the light ones, the magma ones, these were the people who made everyone else look like they'd brought a knife to a very one-sided fight. Which naturally raises the question, and it's a good one, so hold on to it. If some of these people are literally intangible, made of light or smoke, how does anyone ever land a hit on them? There has to be an answer, or the story would just be the Logia users winning forever. And there is an answer. It's one of the best kept, best designed bits of the whole world, and it deserves its own section, so we'll come to it soon. One more thing while we're here, because it's a lovely detail. These fruits are staggeringly rare. Most people go their whole lives never seeing one. They're worth fortunes, hundreds of millions, because a single fruit can turn a nobody into a monster. And for the longest time, nobody in the world in truth knew what they were, or where they came from. There were old sailors' tales that they were the incarnation of sea devils, which is a nice spooky non-answer of the kind you'd expect fishermen to pass around. It took the smartest man in the world, a scientist we'll meet later, to finally work out what these things really are. And his answer is properly one of my favourite ideas in the series, so I'm going to make you wait for it, but only a little. For now, just sit with the shape of the deal. Bite the fruit, get a power that could reshape the world and give up the sea forever. Nearly everyone who's ever taken that deal has decided the power was worth it. Given how much of this world is water, I'm not sure I'd have been so quick. There's a fair bit more to say about how these fruits behave once you've had them a while though. They do something rather remarkable when you've truly mastered one. So let's stay on the fruit a bit longer. Now let's talk about what happens when someone's had one of these fruits for a very long time and pushed it as far as it can go, because there's a hidden gear on all of them, and the story took ages to show it to us. It's called awakening, and it's the point where the power stops being something you have and starts being something that leaks out into the world around you. The clearest way to picture it is with the body warping ones, the paramecia. A normal paramecia user changes themselves. An awakened one changes the environment. So the man who can turn things to string, once awakened, doesn't just make string. He turns the entire city, the roads, the buildings, into his string. The ground itself becomes his weapon. It's the difference between having a power and the power having the neighbourhood. When it first showed up properly, I remember thinking, oh, that's the ceiling being raised. And it turned out there wasn't really a ceiling at all. For the animal ones, the Zoan, awakening works a bit differently. It cranks up the recovery and the toughness to a frankly unfair degree. Awakened Zoan users heal from things that should absolutely finish them. They just keep getting back up, wounds closing, bones setting, while their opponent slowly realises they're in real trouble. There's a catch, mind. Push a Zoan too far, and the animal side can start eating the person side, the instinct swallowing the human. So it's power with a leash of its own. And this is the bit I promised you earlier, so here it is. The Zoan family, the one everyone wrote off as the dull option, has a rare subtype called the mythical Zoan. And a mythical one doesn't turn you into a normal animal. It turns you into a creature out of legend. A phoenix, a dragon, a god. These are the rarest fruits in the entire world. Rarer even than the flashy elemental ones. And over the years it's quietly become obvious that this is where the real monsters live. The man who was called the strongest creature alive, an awakened mythical Zoan. Our own main character, it turns out, after 1,000-odd chapters of everyone assuming he was just a rubber man, mythical Zoan all along. So the draw everyone yawned at was hiding the endgame the whole time. No notice, that's brilliant setup. There are a couple of hard rules worth knowing, because they matter later. The first rule is that you get one fruit and one fruit only. Try to eat a second, and your body can't hold two of these things at once, and you die. Simple as that. It's one of the flat, unbreakable laws of the world. Except, and there's always an except, there is exactly one man who has somehow eaten two and lived. Nobody knows how he did it. It's one of the oldest running mysteries in the series, and the character in question is the sort of grinning, patient villain who clearly knows something everyone else doesn't. How he broke the one rule that kills everybody else is, as far as I know, still not fully explained, and it drives people up the wall in the best way. The second rule is a lovely bit of bookkeeping. When a fruit user dies, the power doesn't die with them. It reincarnates. The fruit reappears somewhere in the world, growing on the nearest ordinary piece of fruit, ready for the next person to stumble across it. So these powers are a fixed set, circling the world forever, dying with one person and being reborn in an apple on the other side of the planet. Which means the fire that one character used could turn up again generations later in someone completely new. I think that's a gorgeous idea. Nothing's ever really gone. It's just waiting on a tree somewhere for the next unlucky soul to take a bite. And now, the thing I made you wait for. What are these fruits really? For most of the story, the honest answer was, nobody has a clue. Then the smartest man in the world sat down and worked it out. And his explanation is my favourite kind, the kind that reframes everything. His theory is that the fruits are the physical shape of humanity's dreams. Specifically, the shapes of things people wish they could be, but evolution never gave them. We can't fly, so somewhere there's a fruit that lets you fly. We can't breathe fire, so somewhere there's a fruit for that. Every impossible thing a person ever wanted to do, sitting there as an unrealised possibility, and the fruit is that possibility made solid waiting to be eaten. So the powers aren't really magic, they're wishes. They're all the versions of ourselves we never got to be. I find that quietly moving. if I'm being soft about it. This world dressed up its superpowers as cursed devil fruit for 1,000 chapters, spooky and dangerous, the incarnation of sea devils. And then it turned round and said, no, they're the opposite. They're hope. They're every daydream anyone's ever had about being more than they are. That's the sort of turn this series does when you least expect it, and it's why the law rewards sitting with it. So that's the fruit. A cursed gift that's secretly a wish, a fixed set of powers, reincarnating round the world forever. One to a person, with one man cheating the rule and refusing to say how. But there's a second kind of power in this world, and it doesn't come from any fruit. Everyone can potentially learn it in theory, though almost nobody masters it. It's invisible, it's got nothing to do with the sea, and it's the answer to that question I told you to hold on to. How do you hit a man made of smoke? Let's finally sort that out. So the man made of smoke, here's how you hit him. The answer is a thing called haki, and it's the second power system running underneath the whole world. It doesn't come from a fruit. It's more like a sense or a will that everyone technically has buried in them, the way everyone technically has muscles they've never trained. Most people never find it. The ones who do and who grind at it for years become the sort of fighter who can stand toe to toe with a god. And there are 3 flavors of it, which is a nice tidy number. So let's take them in turn. The first is the sensing one. Call it observation haki. At the basic level, it's a 6th sense. You can feel people around you, even if you can't see them. Feel how many there are, feel their presence and their mood. Pick up someone sneaking up behind you before they've made a sound. Useful enough on its own. But push it far enough, and it turns into something that borders on unfair. The very best users start to see a few seconds into the future. Not in a vague, mystical way. They literally see their opponent's next move play out before it happens, like a flash forward, and then they simply aren't standing there when the punch lands. Watching a master of this dodge attacks that haven't happened yet is one of the small joys of the series. They look almost bored doing it. The second is the hardening one. Armament haki. This is the practical, everyday workhorse of the 3, and it's the direct answer to our smoke problem. It lets you coat your body, or your sword, or your fist in an invisible armor of pure willpower. And crucially, that armor lets you touch things you otherwise couldn't. So the man made of smoke, whose body your fist would normally sail straight through, can be grabbed and hit and hurt the moment you wrap your hand in this stuff. This is the great equalizer. It's the reason the intangible elemental users stopped looking unbeatable somewhere along the way, because everyone worth their salt learned to punch through the trick. The really skilled users can even send it inside an opponent, past their defenses and wreck them from the inside without leaving a mark on the surface, which is a horrible way to lose a fight if you think about it. And the third one is the rare one, the one you can't learn. Conqueror's Haki. This isn't a technique so much as a birthright. Roughly 1 in a million people are simply born with it, and it can't be taught, only awakened and sharpened. At its simplest, it's the power to impose your will so hard on the world that weaker-willed people around you just crumple and pass out. A room full of tough pirates, and the one with Conqueror's Haki walks in, and half of them hit the floor without a finger being lifted. It's the mark of a natural-born king, and the story is fairly explicit about that. The people with it tend to be the ones history bends around. And the top users, the ones who've really honed it, can do something even nastier. They can wrap their attacks in it, so their punches carry that same crushing pressure. And you can see it now, this black lightning crackling round their fists. When 2 people who both have it clash, the air itself seems to split. It's the visual shorthand the series uses to tell you, quietly, that these 2 are on a completely different level from everyone else on the page. What I like about Haki as a system is that it's the great counterweight to the fruits. The fruits are luck. You either found one or you didn't, and what you got was random. Haki is graft. Nobody's born with the armor or the 6th sense fully formed. They earned it over years of getting battered. So the world has this lovely balance where a fruitless fighter who trained their whole life can absolutely destroy someone who ate a legendary fruit last Tuesday and never put the work in. The series says this outright more than once, in different words. The fruit doesn't make the fighter. I rather appreciate that in a story that's ostensibly all about magic fruit. And there's an implication in Conqueror's haki that runs deep into the older mysteries of the world, though I'll only touch it lightly here so I don't spoil the shape of things to come. The idea that a certain kind of person is simply born to lead, born with a spirit that bends the world, keeps turning up when the story reaches back into its ancient history. The kings, the legends, the figures from the lost past. There's a thread connecting who has this power to who mattered a very long time ago. We'll pull on that thread when we get to the buried parts of the timeline, because it's more fun there. So now you've got the two engines of the world. The fruits, which are wishes made solid, are scattered across the world and cursed by the sea. And haki, the invisible will you build by hand, that lets you hit the untouchable, see the unseen. And if you're one in a million, flatten a crowd with a look. That's the how of this world sorted. How you sail it, how you fight in it. Which means we can start on the far more interesting question, which is the why. Why is it shaped like this? Why is there a single continent and a hidden king and a century nobody's allowed to talk about? And to get anywhere near that, we have to start with the man who kicked the whole modern age off by getting his head cut off in a town square, laughing the entire time. Let's talk about the king of the pirates. Picture a town square, packed with people, a wooden execution platform, and a man kneeling on it with a couple of blades to his neck, waiting to die. He's the most wanted, most feared pirate who ever lived, and the government has finally got him, and they've made a public spectacle of it to prove they're in charge. This is meant to be the moment piracy ends, the big full stop, and then somebody in the crowd shouts up at him, asks where he hid his treasure, all of it, the fortune he spent a lifetime gathering, and the man on the platform, seconds from death, just grins and tells the whole crowd, and the whole world listening, that yes, he did leave it all in one place, his treasure. And if they want it, they can have it. He tells them to go and find it. Then the blades come down. That's the beginning of everything. That's Goldie Roger, the king of the pirates, and that single sentence, tossed out as a joke basically, on his way out of the world, did the exact opposite of what his executioners wanted. Instead of ending piracy, it lit a fire under the entire planet. Because now every restless soul, every dreamer, every desperate kid in a fishing village had a reason to run off to sea. There was a treasure out there, the greatest treasure ever assembled, and the king himself had said it was up for grabs. They started calling it the Great Age of Pirates, or the Golden Age, and it never really stopped. But let's rewind off the platform for a moment, because Roger is fascinating, and the series doles him out in careful little pieces. Before he died, he did the thing nobody else has ever managed. He sailed the whole Grand Line, start to finish, all the way to the final island at the very end. He and his crew really reached the end of the world, and his right hand on that journey was a man called Rayleigh, this brilliant, easygoing figure the story keeps around into the present day, as a sort of living witness to the old age, a bloke who's seen the end of the road and just quietly gets on with his life afterwards. I love Rayleigh. He knows the biggest secret in the world, and he'd rather have a drink. Here's the detail that reframes the whole thing, though. Roger didn't get caught. He turned himself in. He had an incurable illness. He was dying anyway, and rather than waste away quietly, he decided to go out on his own terms, and on the way, hand the world a challenge. He gathered his crew, told them the era was ending, and walked into that execution deliberately. So the moment that looks like the government's greatest triumph, the capture and death of the Pirate King, was truly a man arranging his own exit and using it to change the world one last time. That's a proper power move. The government thought they were closing a book. He was lighting the first page of a new one. Let me paint in the rest of Roger's era a little, because he didn't tower over an empty world. He had rivals, and they were giants in their own right. There was Whitebeard, who we've mentioned, an old-school pirate with the heart of a father, probably the only man the world truly considered Roger's equal. The two of them had a rivalry that was as much friendship as it was competition, the sort where each secretly hoped the other would be the one to make it. And on the other side of the law, there was a marine, a hero named Garp, who chased Roger so relentlessly and cornered him so many times that the two of them ended up with a strange, grudging respect. The hunter and the hunted who'd shared too many near misses to properly hate each other. That same Garp, by the way, is our main character's grandfather, which tells you everything about how tangled this world's family trees are. The Pirate King's greatest rival on the government side is the granddad of the boy trying to become the next Pirate King. It's absurd, and it's perfect. And there's a deeper, darker layer to that generation that the series has only recently started opening up. Before Roger's era truly began, there was an incident on a place called God Valley, an event so buried that most of the world doesn't know it happened, where a young Garp and a young Roger apparently teamed up, just the once, to take down a monstrous pirate crew led by a man whose name also carries that mysterious letter, D. What went on at God Valley and why it was scrubbed from history so thoroughly is one of the newer threads the story is slowly pulling on. Even the age before our age, it turns out, has its own erased chapter. This world just keeps hiding rooms inside its rooms. Now the final island. When Roger's crew reached the end and found what was waiting there, they didn't gasp, they didn't weep, they didn't fall to their knees. They laughed, all of them apparently, just burst out laughing at what they'd found. And Roger was so struck by it that he named the island then and there after that laughter, which is such a strange, wonderful thing to seed into a story. The greatest treasure in the world, the thing everyone's killing each other to reach, and the reaction of the only people who've ever seen it was to laugh. What could possibly be up there that makes a crew of hardened pirates laugh at the end of the world? We don't know yet. That's rather the point of the whole series, and we'll circle back to it right at the end of tonight. Gently, without pretending I've got the answer, because I haven't, and neither has anyone else. What matters for the shape of the world is what Roger's death unleashed. Before him, the seas were dangerous but sort of manageable. After him, everything cracked open. A generation of pirates flooded the Grand Line chasing his treasure. Some of them became legends in their own right. And the government, which had spent so long trying to keep a lid on the world, suddenly found itself facing wave after wave of people who decided the rules didn't apply to them anymore. There's one more thing about Roger I want to leave you with, because it plants a seed we'll dig up later. His full name, the one the government uses in its records, isn't just Gol Roger. There's a hidden initial tucked into the middle of it. A single letter, D Gol, D Roger. At first it looks like nothing, a quirk of a name. But that letter turns up again and again, in the names of people scattered right across the world, and right across history, most of whom have no idea they're connected, is one of the quietest, most patient mysteries in the whole series, hiding in plain sight in people's names, and once you start noticing it, you can't stop. We'll give it a proper section of its own later on, because it deserves one. For now, sit with the image of the man on the platform, grinning, handing the world a treasure hunt with his last breath. Everything that comes after, all the empires and wars and secrets we're about to wander through, spins out from that one moment. And here's where it gets properly interesting. Because to understand why the government was so desperate to be seen executing Roger, so keen to look strong, you have to understand what they're really afraid of. And what they're afraid of isn't pirates. It's 100 years of history they buried a very, very long time ago. So let's go digging. Here's an idea that I think is one of the boldest things at the heart of this whole story. Somewhere in the historical record of this world, there is a hole, a gap of exactly 100 years, roughly 8 to 9 centuries ago, that nobody is allowed to know anything about. Not a vague, we lost the record sort of gap. A deliberate, enforced, punishable by death sort of gap. They call it the void century. And the government will kill you for getting too curious about it. Think about how strange that is. We're talking about a world that can happily tell you its history going back thousands of years. Kings, wars, the founding of nations, all documented. And then there's this one specific window, this single century, where the official answer is a shrug and a warning. Move along. Nothing to see. And the moment you start asking why nothing's there, you understand that the emptiness is the clue. You don't put armed guards around an empty room unless there was something in it worth hiding. So what was in that room? We don't have the full picture, and I want to be careful here, because half the fun of this stuff is what's confirmed versus what's still a genuine question mark. But here's what the story has really told us. A very long time ago, before the world looked the way it does now, there was a kingdom, a great one. The story literally calls it the Great Kingdom because we don't know its real name. And that's not me hedging, that's canon. Its actual name has never been revealed, and it's been made clear that the name itself is one of the most dangerous pieces of information in the entire world. A scholar we'll meet in a moment was shot dead specifically to stop him from saying it out loud. So when I tell you we don't know what this kingdom was called, understand that the not knowing is deliberate and load-bearing. What we do know is that this kingdom was advanced, frighteningly advanced, in ways the present-day world can't match even now. With all its scientists and technology, it had ideals, a way of seeing the world that the powers of the day found threatening, and it was strong enough that it took an alliance of 20 separate kingdoms, banding together to bring it down. One kingdom against 20, and it still took a full-blown war to finish it. That war is the thing that ended the void century, and the 20 kingdoms that won it went on to form the government that still runs the world today. So the people in charge now are, quite literally, the descendants of the winning side of a war they've spent 800 years making sure nobody remembers. And this is the part that I think is the sharpest idea in it. The winners didn't just beat the Great Kingdom, they erased it. They wiped its name, its ideas, its history, out of every record everywhere, and forbade anyone from ever piecing it back together. It's not enough to win. You have to make it so the losing side never existed, so nobody can ever ask whether you were the good guys. That's not the behaviour of people who are confident they were right. That's the behaviour of people with something to hide. The clearest look we ever got at this was through a single, terrible event, and it's one of the most quietly devastating things in the series. There was an island called O'Hara, home to a library and a community of scholars who'd spent generations studying the ancient past trying to reconstruct the lost century. Genuine researchers, archaeologists and scholars. And when the government worked out how close they were getting to the truth, they didn't arrest them. They sent a fleet and wiped the entire island off the map. Almost everyone on the island. An act of mass destruction aimed at scholars whose only crime was reading. The head of that library, an old professor named Clover, got the government's leaders on the line right at the end and started to explain exactly what they were afraid of, why the truth of that kingdom terrified them, and they shot him before he could finish the sentence, cut him off mid-word rather than let it be heard. 2 people survived O'Hara, a little girl, a scholar's daughter, who happened to have the rare ability to read the ancient writing that holds all of this history. She grew up hunted with a bounty on her head from childhood, purely for being able to read. She's one of my favourite characters in anything, and she carries the lost century around with her like an inheritance she never asked for. We'll come back to her and the stone she reads shortly, because they're the actual key to all of this. Now here's the bit that reframes the government's fear. You'd assume they're scared of some weapon, some doomsday device from the old kingdom. And there are weapons, we'll get to those, but that professor made something clear before they silenced him. What the government is most afraid of isn't a weapon at all. It's the ideas. the will of that lost kingdom. Whatever those people believed, whatever they were fighting for, is apparently so dangerous to the way the world is run now that it has to stay buried forever. Their sword scares the government less than their philosophy. And I think that's a really brilliant thing to build a mystery around, because it means the treasure at the end of all this might not be gold at all. It might just be the truth. I'm going to leave the Void Century sitting there for now, half lit, because that's in truth how the series treats it, and it works better that way. We'll keep bumping into it all night from different angles, but let's step out of the dark and into somewhere brighter for a bit, because I've been going on about wars and buried history, and I fancy a change of pace. Let's go and meet some of the people who really live in this world. And I mean people in the loosest possible sense, because some of them are absolutely enormous. Let's talk about the giants, because they're on my mind, and because if you're following the current stretch of the story, the crew is sailing toward the giants' homeland right now. So there's an island called Elbaf, and it's the legendary home of the giants. And these are proper giants, 10-12 times the height of a normal person, tree trunk arms, the lot. But the thing I find lovely about them isn't the size, it's the culture. Elbaf runs on a warrior's code. To a giant, the way you live and the way you fight matters more than whether you win, and dying honourably in a good duel is about the finest end they can imagine. There are these two old giants in the series, best friends, who got into an argument about something so trivial nobody can even remember what it was. And rather than let it go, they've been dueling each other for over 100 years. Just on and off, for a century, over nothing. And to them that's not sad, that's beautiful. That's two mates taking each other completely seriously for their entire lives. I think that's oddly moving if you squint. And here's a fun detail that ties into the bigger picture. The giants of Elbaf worship a sun god. A cheerful, liberating figure from their oldest legends who's said to bring joy and freedom to the downtrodden. Keep that filed away, because that particular god is going to matter enormously later on. And it's a very deliberate bit of foreshadowing that the answer to one of the series' biggest questions was sitting in the giants' folklore the whole time. Now, since we were just down at the bottom of the sea earlier, let's talk about the fish people and the mermaids. On Fishman Island, you've got two related peoples, the fishmen, who tend to be strong, sometimes shark-like, or otherwise fishy in their features, and they are ferociously powerful, several times stronger than a human, especially in water. And the merfolk, the mermaids and mermen, who have the tails you'd expect and are generally a gentler, more graceful presence. There's a charming quirk with the mermaids, by the way, which is that, as children, they have a single tail that splits into two legs when they hit a certain age, so a young mermaid can walk about on land after she grows up. Small detail, but it's the kind of thing that makes the world feel thought through. I won't dwell too heavily here, because the Fishmen's story has a serious side to it. They've been on the receiving end of a lot of cruelty and prejudice from humans over the years, and a big chunk of their part of the story is about that, about hatred passed down through generations, and how hard it is to break. It's handled with real weight. But even setting the heavy stuff aside, the idea of a glowing kingdom at the bottom of the ocean, full of people who can breathe down there, and sea creatures, the size of buildings drifting past the windows, is just a gorgeous piece of world building. Then there are the minks. These are an animal people covered in fur, essentially walking, talking versions of all sorts of creatures, lions, dogs, rabbits, you name it. Lovely, warm, fierce folk. And they live somewhere truly bonkers, which is the best word for it. They live on the back of an elephant. Not a normal elephant, an elephant roughly 1,000 years old and the size of a small country, wading endlessly through the sea with an entire forested nation growing on its back. The minks live up there among the trees on top of this ancient beast, and it just keeps walking forever, going wherever it goes. And here's the detail that gives me chills in a good way. That elephant has been walking for about 1,000 years as a punishment. Something it did or something connected to it ties all the way back to the lost century we were just talking about, and it was sentenced to walk without ever stopping or resting. So there's this living monument to the buried past, plodding across the ocean with a whole civilization on its shoulders, and most of the world has no idea what it even is. That's the sort of thing this series buries in the background and trusts you to notice. And beyond the big, famous peoples, the world is full of smaller human variations that the story treats as completely normal, which I always enjoy. There are people with arms so long they've got an extra joint in them, which gives them extra reach in combat. There are people with legs stretched out to twice the normal length. There's a tribe born with a third eye in the middle of their forehead, which is far rarer, and there's a whole quiet mystery about what that third eye can in truth do when it finally opens, tied yet again to reading the ancient past. There are folk with necks like snakes. The world just shrugs and accepts all of it, and nobody blinks. And I find that a warm way to build a place. It's crowded with difference and mostly gets on with it. And if you want to go really far back, further even than the lost century, there's a strange and lovely thread the series has planted about where people might have come from in the first place. In a quiet side story, tucked away in the margins of the manga, we're shown an ancient civilization that lived on the moon. A people with wings, running low on resources up there, who eventually came down to the surface of the world to survive. The murals in that floating sky city we'll visit later seem to show the same thing: winged people and strange machines. And the illustrations of that great lost kingdom include, if you look closely, images of the moon and its craters. None of it is spelled out, and I want to be careful not to overstate it because the series has never sat you down and explained it directly. But the breadcrumbs are there, scattered on purpose, hinting that the deep history of this world might stretch not just across a buried century, but all the way up off the planet entirely. I love that the story is confident enough to bury something that big in a side chapter and just trust that the people who care will find it. It never begs you to notice. It leaves the door open a crack and lets a bit of moonlight through. And if you happen to look, there's a whole extra layer of history waiting behind it. Most people sail right past. The ones who stop and read the walls get rewarded. That's the sort of world it is, generous to the curious and perfectly happy to keep its best secrets on a shelf you have to reach for. What I love about all of this is that none of these peoples are just set dressing. Every one of them has a thread running back into the deep history of the world. The giants and their sun god, the elephant and its 1,000-year sentence, the fish people, and a promise made to them long ago that we haven't unpacked yet. The world's populated by living clues if you know where to look. But talking a bit about who lives here naturally leads to the question of who's really in charge. Because for all this variety, all these kingdoms and peoples scattered across the seas, there's a single power sitting over the top of nearly all of it. And the way that power holds itself together is one of the more clever bits of political machinery in the series. So let's have a look at how the world is really run, and specifically at the strange balancing act that keeps the whole thing from falling over. But first, before we get to the ones truly at the top, we should talk about the stones. Because everything we've been circling, the lost century, the buried kingdom, all of it, is written down somewhere. On rock. Let's go and read some. So imagine you knew your kingdom was about to be destroyed. You knew the winners were going to erase you from history, burn every book, forbid every mention of your name. How do you get a message to the future anyway? How do you smuggle the truth across all those centuries and past an entire government that's built to stop exactly that? You carve it into stone that can't be broken. That's the poneglyphs. They're these big cubic blocks of a strange, indestructible material, dark and hard, and no one in the present day can make them or destroy them. People have tried. You can't chip them, you can't blow them up. They just sit there, refusing to be gone. And the reason they exist is precisely the reason I just described. The people of the lost century saw the end coming, and they poured their history into these blocks and scattered them all over the world, hidden in temples and vaults and the strongholds of kingdoms, trusting that if enough of them survived, someday somebody would gather the message back together. It's a message in a bottle, except the bottle is unbreakable and the ocean is 8 centuries deep. I think that's a beautiful bit of desperation. The catch, and it's a big one, is the writing. The poneglyphs are carved in the ancient language of that lost kingdom, and that language is dead. Nobody speaks it, nobody's meant to be able to read it, and the government made sure of that by killing anyone who could. The whole point of wiping out that island of scholars was to make sure the stones would sit there full of answers that no living person could translate. A locked message with the government having burned every key. Except, as we touched on, one key survived. That little girl who made it out. She can read the old script, and she is, as far as anyone knows, the only person left in the world who can do it freely. Which makes her, in a very real sense, the single most dangerous person alive, as far as the government's concerned. Not because she can fight, though she can, but because she can read. She's a walking translation of the thing they spent centuries hiding. There's another group who can carve and read the stones too, a family of master stonemasons whose ancestors really made the poneglyphs in the first place, but they've been scattered and hunted as well. So the ability to read the truth of the world comes down to a tiny handful of people, which is exactly how the government likes it. Now here's where it turns into a treasure map, and this is my favourite bit of the design. Some of the poneglyphs are ordinary history, fragments of the buried story. But there are 4 special ones and they're different. They're called the road poneglyphs, and each of the 4 points, like a compass needle, toward a single spot on the globe. Gather the location from all 4, cross-reference them, and the 4 lines meet at one place. And that place is the final island, the end of the Grand Line, the spot Roger reached. So the only way to truly find the last island, the one everyone's chasing, is to hunt down 4 specific indestructible stones hidden in 4 of the most dangerous places in the world, and read a dead language off each of them. This is why simply sailing to the end doesn't work for most people. You can follow the island chain all you like, but without the 4 road stones telling you where to turn at the very end, you'll never find it. Roger managed it. Almost nobody since has. And then there's one more stone above all the others. The story hints at a single master poneglyph that pulls the entire true history together. The whole account of the lost century. The real story of the world, all in one place. Gather everything, read it all, and you'd finally know what the great kingdom was, what its name was, what it believed, why the war happened and who was really in the right. That final reading is, in a sense, the actual finish line of the whole series. The reward underneath the reward. The gold at the end of the Grand Line might be nice, but the truth carved in stone is the thing that would rewrite the world. What I love about the poneglyphs is how patient they are as a bit of storytelling. They're objects. They just sit there. They don't fight, they don't talk, they can't be bargained with. For centuries on end, they've simply waited, holding their message, outlasting every empire and every scholar and every attempt to be rid of them. There's something almost stubborn about them, and something hopeful. The people who made them had every reason to give up, to assume the truth would die with them, and instead they took the long bet. They bet on someone someday, caring enough to look, and the entire series is, in a way, that bet paying off in slow motion. Right, we keep brushing up against this government that's so terrified of a bit of rock, so let's finally look at them properly. Not the shadowy top of it, not yet. We'll save the really unsettling stuff. First, I want to show you the machinery, the balance of forces that keeps the seas in order, or at least keeps them from tipping into total chaos. It's a 3-way arrangement, and once you see how it's built, a lot of the conflicts in the series suddenly make sense. Let's talk about the powers that run the world. For a world this chaotic, full of pirates and monsters, and buried secrets, it holds together surprisingly well most of the time. And the reason is a sort of 3-legged stool of power. 3 great forces, roughly balanced against each other, none quite strong enough to knock the other two over. As long as all three legs are standing, the world stays upright. It's when one of them wobbles that everything kicks off. So let me introduce the three legs. The first leg is the pirates at the very top. There are, at any given time, 4 pirates so powerful, so feared, with fleets and territories so vast that they're treated less like criminals and more like heads of state. They're called the emperors. Between them, they carve up the second, deadlier half of the Grand Line, the New World, into their own domains, and even the government treads carefully around them. These aren't rowdy crews robbing merchant ships. These are figures who rule whole stretches of ocean and whole populations, whose names alone keep other pirates from stepping out of line. When people say the New World is where the real monsters live, the emperors are chief among them. And it's worth saying, the lineup changes, old emperors fall, new ones rise, and the story has had a lot of fun over the years promoting some very unexpected characters into that top tier, including at least one who got there almost entirely by luck and reputation, and now spends every day terrified someone will find out. He's a fraud. I won't spoil which one. It's one of the funniest running gags in the series. The second leg is the government's military. The Navy, or the Marines depending on your translation, the armed force of the world government, sworn to hunt pirates and keep order across the seas. And at the top of the Marines sit a small number of absolute powerhouses called admirals, who are, individually, strong enough to go toe-to-toe with an emperor. That's the whole idea of the balance, really. The emperors on one side, the admirals on the other, roughly matched, each keeping the other in check. Above the admirals is a single fleet admiral running the whole show, and the Marines are a properly interesting force because they're not simply the good guys. Some of them are decent people trying to protect the weak. Some of them are monsters in uniform. And the organisation as a whole answers to a government we already know has a lot of blood buried in its past. So justice in this world is a word that means very different things depending on which Marine is saying it. The series is quite pointed about that. The third leg used to be the odd one out, and it's my favourite of the three because it was such a cynical arrangement. For most of the series, the government kept a group of powerful pirates on a leash, officially pardoned criminals who agreed to work for the government in exchange for keeping their freedom and their plunder. They were called the warlords. The government got muscle it didn't have to pay for, and a bit of deterrence out on the seas. And in return, it looked the other way, while these people did more or less whatever they liked. It was a deal with the devil, several devils, truth be told, and everyone involved knew it. Some of the warlords were loyalish, some were ticking time bombs, and the whole grubby arrangement eventually got scrapped, the government deciding it didn't need pirates on the payroll anymore, now that it had built something else to replace them. But for a long stretch, that was the third leg. The government's tame pirates, propping up the balance from the shadows. And then, threaded through all of this, there's the government's hidden hand, a network of secret agents, spies and assassins operating under names like Cypherpol, most of them numbered ordinary intelligence units, but with a few elite black ops groups at the top who don't officially exist. These are the people the government sends when it needs something done quietly and deniably. Espionage, assassination, cleaning up anyone who's learned too much. The very top unit answers more or less directly to the highest powers in the world, and its agents are strong enough to hang with the big names. So underneath the visible balance of emperors and admirals, there's this whole submerged layer of secret agents making sure the government always has a card up its sleeve. There's one more piece of the machinery worth understanding, because it's the number that hangs over every pirate in the world. And it's not really about money at all. It's the bounty. When the government decides a pirate is a threat, it puts a price on their head, printed on a wanted poster, and that number becomes a sort of public scoreboard of how dangerous the world thinks you are. And here's the detail people often get wrong. The bounty isn't a measure of how evil you are or how much you've stolen. It's a measure of how much of a threat you are to the government specifically. So you get kind-hearted pirates with enormous bounties because they keep embarrassing the Navy, and you get real monsters with small ones because they've kept their heads down. The number is political, not moral. A high bounty is the government admitting, in print, that it's frightened of you. Which is why pirates in this world tend to be delighted rather than upset when their bounty goes up. Getting a bigger price on your head is a promotion. It means you matter now. There's a lovely running thing where a character sees their first ever wanted poster and reacts with pure pride, framing it, showing it off. Because for a lot of these people, being wanted by the entire world is the first time anyone's ever taken them seriously. And the top tier figures, the emperors and the like, carry bounties so vast they stop feeling like real numbers at all. Just a way of the story telling you, quietly, that this person operates on a scale the rest of the board can barely touch. It's an elegant little device when you think about it. One number on a poster tells you where someone sits in the whole pecking order of the world, and tells you it in a way that's about fear rather than fortune. Put it all together, and you've got a rather elegant machine. Pirates at the top of the sea, the navy holding the line against them. Tame pirates propping up the middle, at least for a while, and spies moving through all of it in the dark. 3 visible legs, 1 invisible hand, all leaning against each other, all keeping the world from tipping over. Except here's the thing that makes it all a bit of an illusion. This entire balance, the emperors, the admirals, the whole lot, is the machinery of a government that's just the public face of something else. Because sitting above the navy, above the admirals, above even the highest ranking figures anyone's supposed to know about, there's a layer of power so hidden that most people in the world don't know it exists at all. And the people at the very top of that layer aren't quite what they appear to be either. So let's climb up past the balance of power, up past the part of the government you're allowed to see, and have a look at what's really sitting on the throne. Fair warning, it gets a little strange up there. Up on the red line, the one great continent, there's a holy city called Mary-Joise. It's the capital of the whole world, the seat of the government, and it sits high up on the rock, literally, above everyone else, which is about as on the nose as symbolism gets, and I mean that as a compliment. And living up there are the people the story wants you to understand, least fondly, of anyone in it. The world nobles, sometimes called the celestial dragons. These are the descendants of those 20 kings who won the ancient war and founded the government. Centuries on, their bloodlines have curdled into the most insufferable ruling class you could imagine. They consider themselves so far above ordinary people that they wear these bubble helmets, so they don't have to breathe the same air as the rest of us. I'm not exaggerating for effect, that's the actual detail. They breathe filtered air through a helmet so as not to share the atmosphere with commoners. They can do essentially anything they want to anyone below them, and there are no consequences, because harming a world noble brings the full weight of the navy, admirals, and all down on your head. They keep slaves. They treat human beings as property and pets, and they've been doing it unchecked for centuries. The series does not ask you to find them complicated, it asks you to find them contemptible, and it's very good at its job. But here's the twist, and it's a proper one. The world nobles aren't the top. There's a council of 5 figures, above even them, the 5 elders, presented for most of the series as the highest authority in the world. 5 old men, grave and powerful, the ones who give the orders, the ones who decided to wipe that island of scholars off the map. For hundreds of chapters, they seem to be the final answer. The people at the very top. And then the series pulled the rug out in a couple of ways at once. The first reveal is that the 5 elders aren't quite human, or at least not only human. In the recent stretch of the story, we finally saw them fight, and they transformed. Each of them turns into a monstrous, mythological creature, the rarest kind of power in the world, the mythical beasts we talked about earlier. And on top of that, they appear to be more or less unkillable. People have hit them with everything, and they simply reform and keep coming. So these 5 grey old bureaucrats who've been signing death warrants from a quiet room for centuries are, underneath, ancient immortal monsters, which recontextualizes a great deal. They did inherit their power from those 20 founding kings. There's a real chance some of them were those founding figures, still walking around all these centuries later, having never died at all. And even the 5 elders aren't the top, because the series shows us something in the throne room of Mary Dwars that reframes the entire government. There's an empty throne there, a seat that officially nobody sits on, a symbol that the world governs itself by council rather than by a single ruler. That's the official line. Except the throne isn't empty. There's someone sitting on it, a figure the story keeps in shadow called Emu, and the 5 elders, these immortal monsters who terrify the whole world, bow to Emu, kneel to Emu. So the single most powerful being in the entire world is a person almost nobody knows exists, ruling in total secret from a throne everyone's been told is empty. Who is Emu? That's the thing. We really don't know, and I want to be honest about that rather than pretend. Emu's full identity, history, even basic details are still one of the biggest open questions in the series. But there are threads. Emu seems to know things that only someone from the lost century could know. Emu appears to have personal knowledge of people who lived 800 years ago, as though remembering them rather than reading about them, which points quietly at the same unsettling possibility as the immortal elders. That the person running the world today might be the same person who was running it when that great kingdom was destroyed. That the war we've been talking about, the one that founded everything, might not be ancient history to the one on the throne. It might just be something they did once and have been covering up ever since. Sit with that for a second, because it's the sort of thing that quietly reorganizes the whole story. Every mystery we've touched tonight, the buried century, the erased kingdom, the stones nobody's allowed to read, the death sentence for curiosity, all of it stops looking like the legacy of some long-dead regime. It starts looking like the ongoing work of someone who's still alive, still up there, still keeping the lid on, personally, after 8 centuries. The reason the past is so thoroughly buried might simply be that the person who buried it never left. I love a good shadowy final villain, and this is a superb one, precisely because the series has been so patient about it. For 900 plus chapters, the government was just there, a faceless institution. And then, very late, we find out it has a face after all. Sitting alone on a throne we were told was empty, and that face might be older than the modern world itself. Right, that's enough of the dark and the throne room. Let me bring us somewhere with a bit more heart in it, because for all the immortal monsters and hidden kings, my favourite corners of the lore are the human ones. And there's one particular family whose story ties the ancient past to the present day in the most personal way possible, through a man who managed to sail with 2 of the greatest pirates who ever lived and still come home to break your heart. Let's go to the country of samurai and talk about a family called the Kozuki. There's a country in this world called Wano, a closed-off land of samurai and swordsmiths, styled after old Japan, that sealed its borders centuries ago and cut itself off from the rest of the seas. And ruling it, historically, was a family called the Kozuki. Now the Kozuki matter for a very specific reason that ties everything together, but I don't want to lead with the law. I want to lead with a person, because the person is the whole reason this bit lands. His name was Odin, and he might be the most purely alive character in the entire series. Odin was the heir to Wano, and he was too big for it. Too loud, too curious, too hungry for the world beyond the walls. In a country that had spent centuries insisting nobody leave, he was the one who couldn't stop trying to get out. And eventually he did. He got out, and he did something almost nobody in history has managed. He sailed with not 1, but 2 of the greatest pirates who ever lived. First he ran with Whitebeard, the enormous beloved figure often called the strongest man in the world, an old-fashioned pirate who thought of his crew as family. And then, when their paths crossed, Odin left to sail with Roger himself, the Pirate King, on that final voyage to the end of the Grand Line. So Odin is one of the tiny handful of people who really reached the last island with Roger. He was there. He saw what made them all laugh. He learned the truth of the world, the true history, everything we've spent tonight circling around. He read the stones. He knew. And then he did the thing that makes his story so quietly devastating. He went home. Back to Wano, back behind the walls, because his country needed him, and he loved it more than he loved his own freedom. He carried the biggest secret in the world back to a closed little land and settled down, knowing what he knew, waiting for the right time. And here's the piece that connects the Kozuki to the deep past. When Odin was at the end of the world with Roger, they learned that Wano's isolation wasn't just stubbornness. Wano is tied to the lost century. Its borders were closed for a reason, and one day, according to a promise passed down through Odin's family and others, those borders are meant to open again at a specific moment to greet someone returning. The Kozuki have been keeping a scrap of the ancient truth alive this whole time, waiting for a day their ancestors told them would come. They are, in a sense, a living appointment, centuries in the making. The detail that gives me goosebumps involves Odin's wife, a woman named Toki. Toki had a very strange power. She could leap forward through time, not backward, only forward, sending herself and others into the future. And she used it deliberately, sending her children ahead across decades, so that they'd arrive in exactly the era when Wano's long wait was due to end, and the promised person was due to return. Think about the faith in that. A mother firing her own children like arrows into a future she'd never see, trusting that they'd land at precisely the right moment to be there when history finally turned. She timed it around a return that had been prophesied for centuries, and as far as the story's shown us, her aim was true. I don't want to give away the full weight of Odin's ending, because it's one of the great emotional set pieces of the series, and it deserves to be come upon rather than described. But I'll say this much. Wano fell under the control of one of those emperors we talked about, one of the top pirates in the world, while Odin was away. And Odin spent the last part of his life fighting to free his country, and he faced his end with the same enormous, ridiculous, generous spirit he'd carried his whole life. He went out in a way that was pure Odin, and it took years, and a new generation, and a great deal of grief before that fight was finally finished. But it was finished. Wano did, eventually, come back to its people. The wait wasn't for nothing. While we're in Wano, I have to mention the swords, because the country's other great legacy is steel. Wano's swordsmiths are the finest in the world, and over the centuries, they've forged blades that have become legends in their own right. The series even grades its swords, ranks them like a register of nobility, with a small number of supreme blades sitting at the very top, then a tier of great blades below them, and so on down the list. These aren't just weapons, they're heirlooms, with names and histories, passed down for generations, some of them said to be cursed, some of them said to choose their owners. There's a whole romance to it that I find charming in a story that could easily have treated swords as interchangeable props. A great swordsman in this world isn't just strong, he's carrying a piece of history on his hip, and part of his job is to be worthy of the blade rather than the other way round. There's even a legend of a samurai from Wano so skilled that centuries after his death, his body was, let's say, put to unusual use, and his sheer talent with a blade survived in the bones. I'll leave that one deliberately vague because it's delightfully strange and better stumbled upon. The point is that Wano isn't only the keeper of an ancient secret. It's also the forge where the world's greatest weapons are born. A closed country quietly making the swords that the rest of the world's legends will one day carry. For a place that shut its doors, it's had an outsized hand in shaping the world beyond them. What I love about the Kozuki thread is how it makes the giant, cosmic mystery personal. All that stuff about the void century and the buried truth can feel abstract, distant, the affairs of gods and governments. And then you meet Odin, this warm, roaring idiot with a heart the size of the country he loved, and suddenly the ancient secret has a face and a family and a mother sending her kids into the future out of sheer stubborn hope. The lore stops being a puzzle and starts being about people keeping a promise across centuries, most of them never living to see it kept. That's the trick this series pulls better than almost anything else. It takes the biggest ideas in it and hangs them on somebody you'd have wanted to share a drink with. And that letter, that hidden initial we keep noticing in certain people's names, the D tucked into Rogers, it turns up in this part of the world too, in the old royal lines and the ancient promises. It's been quietly following us all night, so I think it's finally time we stopped and paid it proper attention. Let's talk about the strangest running mystery in the whole series, the one hiding in plain sight in people's names. Here's a thing long-time readers noticed years and years before the series ever explained it, which is my favourite kind of mystery. Certain characters have a strange full name. There's a single letter, D, dropped into the middle of it, between the family name and the first name. Our main character, the Pirate King, that shadowy figure who runs the revolutionary army, who we'll meet properly in a bit, scattered across the whole world, across the heroes and the villains and the ordinary folk. There are people carrying this hidden initial, and almost none of them have the faintest idea what it means. To most of them, it's just a quirk of their name, a family oddity, nothing more. But it means something. It absolutely means something. And the story has slowly confirmed that these people are connected, even though they've never met, even though they're born oceans and generations apart. They're called the Clan of D, or the Will of D, and they're one of the deepest threads in the entire series. Let me tell you what we in truth know, and where the honest limits are, because this is one of those areas where it's easy to slide from fact into fan theory, and I'd rather keep us on solid ground. What's confirmed is that the D was adopted a very long time ago, right around the time of that ancient war we keep coming back to. It was taken up deliberately as a mark of opposition to the alliance that founded the world government. So from the very beginning, the D wasn't a random letter. It was a stance, a side. It marked the people who stood against the winners. And there's a phrase that's followed the D around ever since, whispered by those in the know, which is that the carriers of the D are the natural enemies of the gods. Now in this world, the gods is what the world nobles up on the red line like to call themselves. So read plainly, the Will of D is the bloodline of everyone born to stand against the ruling class. The eternal opposition passed down through a single letter, for centuries, mostly by people who have no clue they're carrying it. We've been given a couple of the earliest names to hold this initial. There was a queen from the ancient world, part of that original founding alliance, who carried the D, and who, for reasons still not fully explained, turned against her own side. She's the one connected to the scattering of the poneglyphs across the world. So one of the very first Ds we know of was a traitor to the winning side, someone who had a change of heart and helped preserve the truth by spreading those stones out of reach. There was also an early figure whose descendants believe he was, at one point, something like the king of the whole world, a claim the current shadow ruler apparently disputes rather sharply. So even in the ancient past, the Ds were tangled up in the fight over who really gets to rule. And here's the eerie, poetic detail that the series has planted around the Ds over the years. They tend to smile when they die. It comes up more than once. A carrier of the D faces their death, often a terrible one, and rather than fear or despair, they meet it grinning. There's an old saying referenced in the story that the D is the one who will always rise again, or bring the dawn, something to that effect, the sense that death isn't the end of what they stand for. just a handing off to the next one. It's the emotional heart of the whole thread. Whatever the D really is, whatever secret it carries, it seems bound up with a refusal to be beaten, a stubborn good cheer in the face of the worst the world can throw at you, which, when you think about it, is exactly the spirit of the sun god the giants worship, and exactly the spirit of that laughter at the end of the world. It all rhymes. Now, the honest bit, what does the D really stand for? What's the secret at the very bottom of it? We don't know. That's still one of the great unanswered questions of the series, and anyone who tells you they've got the confirmed answer is selling something. There are gorgeous theories, and some of them may well turn out right, but the story is holding this one close, and I rather respect that. Some mysteries are better kept warm than cracked open too early. What I find lovely about the will of D is how it turns the whole story into something bigger than any one character. Our main character isn't special because he's the chosen one. He's special because he's the latest in a line centuries long. All these people across all these centuries who kept standing up against the same rulers, kept losing, kept smiling, kept passing the torch onto a stranger they'd never meet. The current Pirate King candidate is fighting a fight that isn't really his. It's a relay that's been running since before the modern world existed, and he just happens to be the one holding the baton now. There's something quietly stirring about that, about being a small link in a very long, very stubborn chain of people who wouldn't kneel. And speaking of people who won't kneel, and of that shadowy figure I mentioned who carries the D and happens to be our hero's own father, there's an entire hidden army out there right now, working in secret to bring the whole rotten system down. So let's talk about the people trying to truly finish the fight the Ds have been losing for 8 centuries. Let's talk about the revolution. The government calls one man the single most dangerous person in the entire world. Not an emperor, not a rival warlord, a revolutionary. His name is Dragon, and he leads a hidden organization dedicated to one thing: tearing down the world government itself. Not reforming it, not reasoning with it, ending it. And the delicious little detail, dropped almost as an aside early in the series and left to sit there for ages, is that this man, the government's #1 enemy, is our main character's father. The lad in the straw hat, chasing treasure, has no idea for the longest time that his dad is off somewhere trying to topple the people who run the world. They're fighting the same war from completely different directions, and neither of them planned it that way. The revolutionary army works in the shadows, which is a nice contrast to the loud, upfront way pirates operate. They move quietly, building support in oppressed kingdoms, freeing people where they can, chipping away at the foundations of the government's power. And Dragon's second in command is another familiar face if you know the story, a young man named Sabo, who has his own deep history with the main crew that I won't unravel here, because it's a proper emotional gut punch, and it deserves to be discovered rather than summarised. What matters is that the revolution is real, it's organised, and it's the closest thing the world has to an actual answer to everything we've been describing. All these injustices, the buried truth, the untouchable nobles, the slavery, the erased century. The revolutionary army is the group that's decided enough is enough. Because make no mistake, underneath the elegant balance of power we walked through earlier, the world of One Piece is rotten in places, and the story does not look away from it. The world nobles keep human beings as slaves, openly, legally, protected by the full might of the Navy. There's a whole hidden machinery of human trafficking and auction houses feeding that appetite, catering to the whims of the ruling class. People are branded, caged, sold, and the ordinary machinery of the world quietly allows it. Because the alternative is crossing the gods on the red line, and almost nobody dares. It's the ugliness sitting right underneath the shine, and the series makes sure you feel the weight of it rather than letting it stay abstract. A lot of that ugliness comes to a head in one particular place, a lawless archipelago that sits right at the halfway point of the world, the last stop before you dive down to that undersea island and cross into the second half of the Grand Line. It's a chaotic tangle of mangrove islands covered in enormous trees that leak a resin used to coat ships for the deep dive. And because it's the final waypoint before the new world, every kind of person passes through it. Pirates stocking up for the crossing, marines watching them, and, in its grimmest corner, the auction house, where the world nobles come to buy people. It's the spot where the shine of the world and the rot underneath it sit side by side most plainly. A beautiful, bustling waypoint full of wonder, with a slave market running quietly in the back room. The main crew passed through there and had a run-in with the nobles that went about as badly as these things can go. And it was one of the moments that made it clear the story wasn't going to pretend the world was clean. What I appreciate is that the series doesn't use the place for a lecture. It shows you plainly both halves at once, the marvel and the cruelty in the same square mile, and lets you sit with the fact that they coexist. That's closer to how the real world tends to work than most adventure stories are willing to admit, and it gives the whole thing a weight it wouldn't otherwise have. There's one particular story that ties this all together, and it's one of the most heartbreaking in the series, so I'll tread gently. There was a man, a huge, gentle figure, who ended up as one of those tame warlords working for the government, seemingly a loyal enforcer, cold and obedient. For hundreds of chapters, he was treated by the story and by the reader as basically a tool of the establishment. And then very late, the series peeled him back and showed us who he really was underneath. A kind man, a father, someone who'd suffered enormously under the exact system he appeared to serve, who made an almost unbearable series of sacrifices for the people he loved and for a future he'd never get to see. And it turned out he'd been quietly connected to that liberating sun god faith all along, standing in for the hope that someone, someday, would come to set the downtrodden free. When his full story finally landed, it recoloured everything you thought you knew about him. I won't say more, because watching that reveal unfold in its proper place is one of the great experiences the series has to offer. But I mention it because it's the perfect example of how this world hides its most tender stories inside its most fearsome-looking figures. There's also the grand political gathering that happens once every few years, where the kings and rulers of the world's member nations come together at Mary Joieuse to discuss the state of things. It's the one time all this power sits in one room. And it's where a lot of the recent law has quietly turned, decisions made behind closed doors, old alliances tested, one brave ruler getting far too close to the secret at the top and paying the ultimate price for it. It's the sort of setting where the polite surface of the world and the brutal machinery underneath it briefly touch, and you get to see how thin the marble really is. What I appreciate about this whole layer of the story is that it keeps the series honest. It would be easy for a big adventure tale about pirates and treasure to be pure escapism, all sunshine and punch-ups, and there's plenty of that, and it's glorious, but threaded all the way through is this clear-eyed acknowledgement that the world is run by people who don't deserve to run it, that there are victims underneath the adventure, and that somewhere out there, a quiet army led by our hero's own father is trying to do something about it. The treasure hunt is the surface. Underneath, it's a story about freedom, and about who gets to have it, and about the long, slow, generational work of prizing it out of the hands of people who hoard it. Right, we've circled it all night, from the giant's folklore, to the smile of the dying D's, to that gentle warlord's hidden faith. So let's finally sit down with the thing at the centre of it, the figure whose name keeps surfacing, the sun god, the first pirate, and the weapons old enough to have reshaped the planet itself. Let's talk about Joy Boy. Let's start with the nicest idea in the whole series, because it's easy to forget, under all the buried wars and immortal kings, that the thing at the centre of it is joy. Genuine, silly, liberating joy. Remember the sun god the giants worship, the one I told you to file away. His name is Nika, and the legend of him goes back to the days when slaves and the downtrodden had nothing to hope for. In the old stories, Nika was a warrior who moved as if he were made of laughter, free and rubbery and impossible to pin down, and he'd appear to free the enslaved and drive off their tormentors, and he made people laugh even in the worst circumstances. He was the god the powerless prayed to, not a god of thunder or war, a god of freedom and fun. The idea that no matter how heavy the boot on your neck, someday someone would come dancing along to lift it, and you'd laugh again. That's Nika, and I think it's rather beautiful that in a story so full of tyrants, the oldest and most sacred figure is essentially the god of not being crushed. Now, the recent stretch of the series finally sorted out something fans had tangled together for years. So let me be precise about it, because the precision matters. There's Nika, the mythical sun god, the figure of legend. And separately, there was Joy Boy, an actual person, a real man who lived during the lost century. These are two different things. Joy Boy was history's very first pirate, a real figure from that ancient war, and he wielded a power that resembled Nika's, the same rubbery, joyful, unstoppable quality. So Joy Boy wasn't the god. Joy Boy was a man who carried the god's power and the god's spirit into the great war of the lost century. He fought the alliance that would become the government. He lost, in the sense that the war ended and the government stood. But before it all fell apart, he left something behind. A promise, something waiting at the end of the world for whoever could one day reach it. And that promise is tangled right up in the treasure everyone's chasing. Here's where it loops back to our own main character in a way that truly delighted people when it landed. For over 1,000 chapters, everyone assumed his power was simple. Rubber, a body like elastic, one of those catch-all paramecia fruits, a bit goofy, not that special. And then the series revealed that his fruit was never really a rubber fruit at all. It's one of the rarest mythical beast fruits in existence, and the beast in question is the sun god himself. So the cheerful, dim, endlessly optimistic lad we've been following, the one who just wants to be free and have adventures and eat too much, turns out to be carrying the reincarnated power of the god of freedom, and to be, in a real sense, the return of Joy Boy that the world has been waiting all this time for. All that folklore, all that ancient hope landed on the least self-important person imaginable, who mostly just wants his dinner. I think that's a perfect joke and a perfect bit of meaning at the same time. The god of laughter chose a properly funny host. Right, the weapons, because they're the other half of what came out of the lost century, and they're properly terrifying. During that ancient war, weapons existed with power on a scale the modern world can barely comprehend. 3 of them, each named after a god, each capable of mass destruction. And the story's been dropping their names for a very long time. Pluton, Poseidon, Uranus. Poseidon is the one we understand best, and it's the strangest, because it isn't a machine at all. It's a person. Specifically, it's an ability that appears, very rarely, in a mermaid princess of the royal line under the sea, the power to command the colossal sea kings, those enormous ocean monsters, and bend them to your will. Imagine being able to summon every leviathan in the ocean at once. That's Poseidon, and right now it lives in a shy, gentle, enormous mermaid princess who's terrified of her own power, which is a lovely bit of irony. Pluton is more what you'd expect. It's a warship, an ancient battleship of such destructive force that it's said to be able to level an entire island in a single shot. The blueprints for it have been a plot thread for ages, passed down and fought over, and the ship itself is currently believed to be hidden away, buried, waiting. A doomsday weapon in dry dock. And Uranus is the one we know the least about, so I'll be careful. For most of the series, it's just been a name. There's a strong implication from a devastating event in the recent story where an entire kingdom was wiped off the map in an instant by something coming from above, that Uranus may be in the government's hands and may already have been used. But I want to flag clearly that the exact nature of Uranus hasn't been fully confirmed. Fans have all sorts of theories, and some of them are wonderful, but the honest position is that it's still largely a mystery, and I'd rather tell you that than pretend otherwise. Here's the revelation that ties the weapons to the shape of the whole world, and it might be the biggest lore drop the series has ever done. That scientist, the smartest man in the world, managed to broadcast a message to the entire planet before the government could stop him, and in it, he revealed that the world didn't always look like this. It wasn't always one continent and scattered islands. Long ago, there were multiple great land masses, whole continents, and during or after that ancient war, the sea levels were raised, deliberately, drowning huge parts of the world, sinking the old geography under the waves, and leaving behind the scattered island world we know now. The very map we started the night with, the 4 seas, and the one red continent, is itself a wound. It's what's left after somebody flooded the world, which means every island out there might be the peak of a drowned country, and the whole ocean is sitting on top of the world that used to be. I find that staggering, and it recolours the entire map. We've been sailing across a graveyard the whole time and calling it the sea. So that's the centre of it. A god of freedom, a first pirate who carried his spirit, a promise waiting at the end of the world, 3 weapons that could unmake it, and a flood that already remade it once. It's a lot to hold, so let me set it down gently and take us somewhere quieter to finish. Let me show you a few of my favourite corners of this world, just to wander a while before we let the night wind down. I want to spend a little while just visiting some spots without any grand point to make. Think of it as a slow walk through a few of my favourite places in this world before we call it a night. No mysteries to crack here, mostly. Just atmosphere. Let's go up first. There's an island in the sky. I don't mean a mountain, I mean a proper island, floating thousands of metres up on a sea of cloud, with its own people and its own kingdom and its own history, reachable only by a freak natural current that flings ships up through the atmosphere. When the crew first found it, it felt like stepping into a fairy tale, all white cloud seas and golden light, and strange sky people with little wings on their backs. But here's what makes it stick with me. Buried up there in the clouds is the ruin of an ancient golden city, a place with its own tragic lost history, its own forgotten people who were driven from their home far below, and carried a great bell up into the sky as the one piece of home they refused to leave behind. There's a whole story up there about a man who came back from an expedition claiming he'd found a city of gold and was branded a liar and executed for it, when the truth was that the city had simply risen into the sky along with the land it stood on. Centuries later, someone finally rings that bell so the sound carries all the way down, proving the so-called liar had been telling the truth the entire time. I find that one of the most quietly beautiful things in the whole series, a promise kept centuries too late, but kept. Now let's come back down to the water, to a city built on the sea itself. A place of canals and shipwrights, where the streets are waterways and the whole town rises and falls with the tide, and the finest boat builders in the world ply their trade. It's a gorgeous setting on its own, but it's also where the history of the world came crashing back into the main story. Because it's where that lone survivor of the erased island, the woman who can read the ancient stones, finally had to face her past. It's not the place where she stopped running. That happens later at Aenea's lobby. There's a moment there when she's been hiding her whole life, believing that everyone who gets close to her ends up destroyed by the government hunting her, when she finally, for the first time, admits out loud that she wants to live, that she wants to keep going with these people despite everything. And her new crew burns their bridges with the entire world government to come and get her back. For my money, it's the emotional high point of the early series, and it's the moment the buried history stopped being a distant mystery and became something a person you love is carrying on her shoulders. I get a bit soft about that one, so I'll leave it there, and since we've spent all night circling it, let me take us gently to the last island. The one at the very end, the place Roger reached, that made his crew laugh, that Odin saw, that the 4 roadstones point toward. I'm not going to pretend I can tell you what's on it, because nobody can. The series hasn't shown us, and that's completely deliberate. But we can talk about the shape of it. The name it was given, remember, came from the laughter of the people who first arrived. And there's a strong sense running through everything we've covered that what's waiting there isn't simply a pile of gold, it's the truth. The whole true history of the world, the full story of that lost kingdom, the answer to every question we've brushed against tonight. Along with, quite possibly, something left there by Joy Boy himself. A message across the centuries to whoever was finally strong enough and stubborn enough to make it back. The idea that the greatest treasure in the world might turn out to be knowledge and a laugh and a promise finally kept is the sort of thing that makes me love this daft, enormous story so much. Before we drift toward the harbour, let me take you to 2 more, quickly. First, a kingdom in the desert, endless dunes, a proud old royal family, a city that stood for thousands of years. On the surface, it's a story about a rebellion tearing a country apart. But underneath, that royal family is one of the oldest in the world, dating all the way back to those founding kingdoms. And they've been keeping a secret of their own for as long as their line has ruled, a stone hidden beneath the palace and a duty passed down through every generation of rulers since the ancient war. A quiet promise to protect something, kept faithfully across the entire span of recorded history by a line of kings in the sand, most of the world never knowing. There's something wonderful about a place that looks like a straightforward adventure and turns out to have roots that go down to the very bottom of the world's history. And second, a winter island, all snow and pink blossoms, somehow blooming in the cold, with a castle on a hill, and a story about a quack doctor and a little reindeer who ate one of those fruits and learned to walk and talk and heal. It's one of the gentler, sadder, warmer corners of the whole series. A story about being an outcast and finding people who want you around. And it sits in my memory as a soft, blue-white place I'd happily return to. Not every important spot in this world is a battlefield or a buried secret. Some of them are just a warm room in the snow where somebody decided a strange little creature was worth loving. Those matter as much as the weapons and the thrones, if you ask me. Maybe more. There are 100 other places I could take you. A winter island home to a reindeer doctor. A desert kingdom with its own ancient royal secret. An island shaped like a cake, ruled by a family the size of a small nation. A prison at the bottom of the sea and a fortress in the middle of it, where the navy makes its last stands. I've got whole nights worth of wandering left in me for each of them, and maybe we'll do exactly that another time. That's the thing about this world. You could stroll through it for years and keep finding rooms you hadn't opened yet. It doesn't really have an edge you can walk off of. It just keeps going. But every walk has to end somewhere, even if the world doesn't. So let me bring us back toward the harbour, and we'll let the night settle, and I'll say a few last things before you drift off, if you haven't already. And if you have, well, that's all right too. The story will still be here. So that's the world. Or a decent chunk of it anyway. The shape of the seas, the cursed fruit that are secretly wishes, the invisible will you build by hand, the century somebody deleted, the stones that remember, the letter hiding in people's names, the god of freedom, and the flood that drowned the old world to make the one we've been sailing across all night. The thing that keeps me coming back to all this, and the reason I wanted to spend the evening on the lore rather than the fights, is that it was all planned, or at least it feels planned in a way almost nothing else does. That laughter at the end of the world got mentioned near the very start, decades ago, and it's still paying off now. The little D in Roger's name was sitting there the whole time. The sun god was in the giant's folklore, waiting. Whole answers were buried on page 1 and left to ripen for 20-odd years before anyone dug them up. That's a rare thing, that kind of patience. And it's why the payoffs land the way they do. You get the feeling the person telling this story knew where the end was before most of us knew there was a beginning. And the lovely part is that we're really near it now. After all these years, the series has finally sailed into its last great stretch, the part where the buried things start coming up for air. The shadow on the throne has a name now. The 5 elders finally stood up and showed what they were. The truth about the flood went out to the whole world in a single broadcast. Piece by piece, the mysteries we spent tonight sitting with in the half-dark are being brought into the light, which is a strange feeling if you've been along for the ride a while. A bit like watching something you've wondered about your whole life slowly turn to face you. I don't have a neat bow to tie on it, and I don't think it wants one. That's sort of the appeal. It's a story about freedom told by a man who refuses to be rushed, full of people who smile at death and keep passing the torch to strangers, all of them heading for an island at the end of the world that promises the truth, and a laugh in equal measure. There are worse things to have on in the background while you fall asleep. If your eyes are still open, thank you for wandering through it with me. If they've been shut for a while, then this last bit's just for the room, and that's fine. Either way, there's more of this world than one night could ever hold, and I'll happily pick it back up another evening, another corner of it whenever you fancy. For now though, let the harbour go quiet. Let the log pose settle, and we'll set off again some other night toward the next island along. Sleep well.